Hello and welcome to the show. My name's Relevant. This is Do All the Things. On today's episode, a little bit of story time as I explain the series of coincidences that led up to me installing this receptacle into my kitchen. Now, I am not a professional electrician, therefore I'm not qualified to teach you and instruct you on how to do electrical, which is the reason why this video is for entertainment purposes only and why I've opted to go with a story time format. If you find residential electrical interesting, maybe you'll enjoy this story. I don't know. If not, hey, there's other stuff you could be watching, right? Now, as the story goes, I moved into this house late 2018. I was moved in by December. And through the winter and spring of 2019, I spent that time pretty much going over the electrical system in this house with a fine-tooth comb. You see, it was freshly renovated when I moved in. And even though it was originally built in the 70s and the original electrical work was excellent, well planned out, well laid out, the layers of electrical work added on top of it after got, a little bit questionable because, of course, you have to work around things, right? Now, for the most part, it was okay, but there was a couple things that I didn't like. There were a few mistakes, like, hey, that wire is going well too close to a heating duct, and why would you route it to this way when you could route it that way? And some of those things the things that I didn't like are what prompted me to do some of what I've done here to the kitchen. Now, for the record, all the electrical modifications I did under permit, and it did have a proper inspection. One of those things was completely replacing my breaker panel. I had an old FPE system and the breakers were feeling a bit stiff, and I even went as far as to connect wires to it and did the direct short circuit, like just to see if the breakers would pop. And in some cases, no. They're old breakers, and FPE apparently had a 60% failure rate to begin with. So in doing the inspection of this electrical system, not only did I blueprint it, as I would say, but I brought it all up to 2018 code, AFCI and the whole 9 yards. I did experiments with AFCI to see how it worked, and I decided I like this. I do want this in my home. If implemented correctly, it's not a problem. One thing that was done in this house was the kitchen. It got completely renovated. It is a different floor plan and layout than it was before. And code dictates that you have to put receptacles in certain spots. For example, there and there. So why don't I have them? Well, I deleted those plugs for a couple reasons. One of them being, this is kind of like a prep area. I wasn't gonna be plugging stuff in. We got the toaster right there or another receptacle right there. So it's like, this section's covered. And then over here, initially, moving in as a bachelor, this was kind of like the bar area. I had some bottles set up. This is where I poured my drinks. I wasn't gonna be plugging anything in here either. So it's like, well, I don't need plugs there, but I do need other things and things somewhere else. Enter this receptacle right here. Or it's not a receptacle, it's a switch, but it was a receptacle. You see, in the original floor plan of the kitchen, that was a receptacle. And if you know anything about electrical, especially older electrical, you know that once upon a time, before we had the 20 amp services we have in our kitchens now, we had a 15 dual 15 split. So that was a 14 3 wires, 1 neutral and 2 hots. And basically, each half of your receptacle would have its own hot wire going to its own breaker. So that was 2 15 amp services, and they weren't daisy chained. It would be one breaker set for one receptacle for a virtual 30 amps of power in your kitchen. Now, they did away with that for a couple reasons. One being, if you had a high drain device like a toaster oven, it could feed off a 15 amp service, but the problem is you're supposed to derate your services. So if you have a 15 amp service, you're only supposed to be using 80% of that rated capacity so that you don't heat up the wire. It also gives you overhead. So even for an individual 15 amp service, some high drain devices would be technically too much for it. It was better to run a 20 amp system. Even though you only have 20 amps and it could be on multiple receptacles, the idea is you might only have one high drain device per receptacle reset. So you would have plenty of overhead, you wouldn't come close to your D rating, and even if you plug something else in, chances are you weren't using it at the same time, yada, yada, yada. You get the idea. But the second reason why is because they implemented GFCI protection. So that's that magical little test reset receptacles you see. If you're not sure what those are for, they can basically detect if whatever you're plugging in is gotten wet. Wet in such a way that it poses a safety hazard, like it could shock you. That's the reason why you see them in bathrooms. You couldn't actually electrocute yourself with a toaster in the bathtub unless you ran an extension cord to a non-GFCI receptacle in another room. Because of the way GFCI works, it's not compatible with split plugs. Granted, maybe they could have designed something that is, but they didn't, and so now we have the electrical system we have now. So what happens is this switch right here has a 14-3 wire to it leading all the way from the breaker box. Originally, the kitchen didn't have this door. This is now another outside access, and with this door there is an outdoor light that also wasn't originally there, so the electrician needed to power it somehow. He used half of this 14-3 split. Okay, seems legit. But what did he do with the other half? Well, we didn't have a dishwasher there before either. But what he did was he took the other half of the split and used it to power the dishwasher. I didn't like this because you're virtually sharing the dishwasher circuit with an outdoor circuit. And I'm thinking, well, what if something happens to that outdoor light, it gets smashed, short circuits, is that gonna mess with the dishwasher? Technically no, because of how a split circuit works, it's perfectly fine. I still didn't like it. But then I always have multiple reasons for doing stuff. It just so happens that the dishwasher is one of those quote-unquote high drain devices. It has a 13 amp rating written right on it, which is above 80% D rate for a 15 amp circuit. By code, dishwashers are supposed to have a 20 amp service, or at least a 20 amp cable. Now I'm sure the electrician knew what he was doing, but nevertheless, I didn't like it. So I wanted a dedicated 20 amp line for the dishwasher, but I also wanted a 3-way switch for the outdoor light. And if you know how 3-way switches are wired, you know they use 14-3 wiring, which is already present going right to this box. So that was convenient. I have another switch outside the house in which I can turn that outdoor yard light on and off. And then I have the other half of the switch here. It ran all the way to breaker panel, and when I added new situations to the outside of the house, well, those wires ran to the breaker panel too. So it got junction there, boom, 3-way switch, no longer have the ability to run a split circuit. So I needed new power for the dishwasher, and as I mentioned, I wanted it to be a 20 amp service. Which brings us back to over here. Those being receptacles had a 20 amp service, and they were daisy chained on the same circuit. So I don't need plugs here, but I want a 20 amp service for my dishwasher. Well then, what if I reroute power from here? Sure. And in fact, it worked out perfectly because once I pulled the wire out of the wall, I was able to just reroute that wire over to the dishwasher, and it was the perfect length. Perfect. So that was the first coincidence. But again, I usually have multiple reasons for doing things. So why else did I choose to delete it here? Well, enter this thing. Oh boy, that's a dilly of a pickle right there. So, as that story goes, when the contractors were renovating this house, they had this amazing big brain idea, the most brilliant idea in the entire situation. That idea was to take the water heater, which was centrally located in the house and relatively close to the kitchen, and move it all the way to the other side of the house, near where the furnace was, with the argument being we're gonna have a convenient little utility room, and then we can make the room downstairs more the posh laundry room. Yeah, brilliant, big brain idea, for a couple reasons. Reason number one, now it's located directly under the master bedroom, and in fact, it's almost physically right underneath my head when I'm sleeping in my bed. And it's a power vent water heater. That means it has a nice wicked blower fan on it that you have to frickin' listen to when you're trying to sleep. Fortunately, since we don't run water typically while we're sleeping, it doesn't kick on at night. Or does it? You see, because the other reason why this was such a brilliant frickin' idea is because now that the water heater is all the way at the other side of the house, fed by uninsulated pipes that cool off when you're not using it, when you go to turn the hot water on at the sink to do some dishes, you don't get hot water for a good 2 minutes. You're literally standing there with the water wasting running full blast for a solid 2 minutes or more before you're getting hot water. Big brain! Big brain! But wait, there's more. You see, this was completely unacceptable. So what was the solution? You want to know what the solution was? A hot water recirculator pump. So there's not one hot water line coming to this sink, there's two. There's the main hot water, and then there's a return line, which has a pump and a one-way valve. The idea is that pump keeps circulating hot water through the line. You're not wasting water because it's going right back to the hot water tank to be reheated. And then it keeps that water line freshly stocked with steaming hot water. Just keeps the water moving, which is great because now you have instant hot water and the hottest of water. It's also great because that uninsulated pipe is radiating that heat, wasting energy, and now you do have your power vent water heater running in the middle of the night while you're trying to sleep because it cools in the pipe. And it brings me back to another reason why I deleted these receptacles, because I needed to install a switch, which brings me to the next set of coincidences. You see, where they installed the hot water heater, which used to be part of the back basement, back in the 70s when they built this house, they would also wire up extra power in the basement too, in case you wanted to have a workshop, run power tools, you know how it is. So what was there? Another one of those dual 15 amp splits with a 14-3 wire, going all the way back to the breaker panel. What does that mean? It means I was able to split that receptacle with that wire so that one receptacle was switched and one was non-switched. The non-switched one operating the water heater and the switched one operating the recirculator pump. So that allowed me the ability to install a switch without having to run any new wires over there. So that's coincidence number one. The second one, for some reason, when they renovated the kitchen, they did move the position of the fridge. And according to what I found in the wall, the fridge had a dedicated line. But did they just junction and extend that dedicated line? No, they didn't. They ran a whole new line all the way back from the panel, which is all the way at the other side of the house, by the way, like completely opposite of where the fridge is. So they did all that work to run a new line to the fridge instead of just extending the existing line the same way they did for some other circuits here, including the stove. Which I found peculiar, and what it meant was that I had an abandoned line running all the way from the panel to the kitchen, just over there behind the camera, which was coincidence number two for this switching circuit, because now I had a line going all the way back to the panel I could use to wire the switch, and it was already in the general kitchen area, so I was able to just junction it and extend it over to here, and boom, I got my switch. Which now brings us here to this guy, because I did delete that receptacle. Hey! Which brings us here to this guy, because I did delete that receptacle, thinking I wasn't gonna need it and I needed the power somewhere else. But you know, circumstances change. Basically, after I started up this channel, I started drinking less and less. I wasn't an alcoholic or anything, I just liked my scotch on the rocks at the end of the day. But then I found myself wanting to afford to do other things when it came to my hobbies and practices that I show you on this channel. So I just stopped buying drinks, and then this area got stagnant and I decided to repurpose it. And it just so happens, well, as things would have it, I have a woman here hanging out quite frequently now, and she really likes to cook. So she's basically here all the time in this particular area doing her thing. But the funny thing about her is she's a complete media addict. Like, she has to have something, music or TV, going while she's in the kitchen. And you know, it started off, she'd be watching her silly shows on her phone, okay? That's what all the kids are doing these days. And then it upgraded to like an iPad tablet. Yeah, makes sense. I would too. But then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, she shows up with this freaking monster behemoth here. That thing is freaking bigger than the TV I grew up watching. That thing's bigger than my first computer monitor up until the 2000s. Frickin' beast. I didn't even know they made tablets that big. I thought you were getting a laptop at that point. But the funny thing about this guy is she's thirsty, bud. You're not getting a lot of hours of battery power off this if you're streaming video like constantly. So it has to get plugged in, and because I don't have a receptacle here, I caught her doing the silly thing where she's stretching a wire from the island across to over where she puts this, which is completely unacceptable, and as you know, exactly why code makes us put receptacles everywhere, so that tomfoolery doesn't exist. So I am like, okay, no, we're not doing that because, you know, there's only a matter of time before we trip that. It's hanging midway. It's not even going all the way to the ground. That was just an accident waiting to happen. So I ran an extension cord to the living room, which is also tomfoolery and the reason why code makes you put receptacles everywhere. And of course, this thing doesn't just charge off USB power. It's got a barrel connector in it. It practically uses full snot, 19 volts, 2 amps like a laptop. So I'm putting a receptacle back in there, which I can do easily because of more coincidences. Now, one question you might be asking yourself is right away is, but Mr. Relevant, if you did this work under permit and got it inspected, how did you even get this non-code implementation passed? Well, for one, the inspector was impressed by my work. After all, I did do a whole panel install. I didn't just do a pedestrian change a receptacle here. I did an entire service entrance install by myself, and he was like, "You look like you've done this before." Yeah, I worked for a sound company for 8 years where I had to build distros. And when I explained my methodology, because I needed that switch and I didn't need power here, he said, okay, I'll pass it. Under the condition that if you sell the house, you have to put it back the way it's supposed to be. But with that, he did give me his blessing to put a receptacle back there. He straight up told me, what you do, if you pull another 20 amp line, you can put power back there. So that's what I'm doing. However, this is not a 20 amp receptacle. This is a 15 amp receptacle. I'm not interested in a high drain device here. I'm interested in being able to charge devices. And this is an older unit. It's like one of the first units you could get at your local tire store that had USB receptacles, but it does have a nice 2 amp version. It's not QC. It works well enough. I've been happy with the performance of it. So in here, I don't know if you can see that, but I already have a fish line. I already have a piece of scrap wire that's in there going from top to bottom so that when the day comes and I want to pull new wire through there, it would be convenient to do. Now, one of my least favorite parts of doing something like this is working in the drop ceiling and having to pop all the tiles because they rain dust. But I'll be honest with you, I'll take it any day over the alternative. If you have drywall ceilings in your basement, I feel sorry for you because if something goes wrong, like a leaky pipe, you're going to have a horrible, expensive mess. That, and it's a real pain in the arse to make changes if you have to. I was in the fortunate position when I knew I was getting this house. It was before the renovations. So I had a bit of a say on what kind of work was done to it. And one of the absolute, I will not take a no for an answer requirements, the deal is off. Otherwise, was that there is drop ceiling in the basement completely so that I can easily maintain this property. I can get at my plumbing, I can get at my heating, I can get at my electrical. It's more expensive to implement, but it's gonna save you money in the long run, especially if you're a DIYer, and it sounds better too. It has less reflectivity. It's a warmer sound. If you're doing the home theater thing, a room with drop ceiling sounds way better than a room with the drywall ceiling. So you're gonna see right here, this is the scrap puller wire. I have it fastened pretty securely. But here is where we lead to the next set of quizzes, the reason why this is gonna be easy. If you look right here, we have a GNDN junction box. GNDN goes nowhere, does nothing. Now, that thing connects to the electrical circuit that's in this room. This room has its own breaker, which means only what's in this room is on that breaker, the lights and the plugs. It's not sharing the circuit with any other area of the house. So there's a lot of power for just this one room, even though it's just the one breaker. If I recall correctly, that junction box is hot. For some reason, there's a piece of wire coming off the lighting junction where power is, going a couple feet over that junction box, and then there's nothing connected to it. It's just like there was a spare piece of wire coming off of there that might have been used for some sort of old pre-renovation circuit, and they just left it. They just left it there. So let's take a look inside and see what we got to work with here. Oh, it's close to the wood, so I can't just slide it off, but I gotta take this screw all the way out. That is what I would consider a bit of a sloppy install. Okay. All right, so we got a couple lines here. There's the hot line right there. I gotta take the multimeter, set it to 200 volts AC. I gotta connect one line to ground. I gotta carefully remove this marée. Yeah, bud, she's live. Indeed, she's live. Now the other thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go cut power to this room and see if it goes not live. Dead. Well, the lights went out, so I got the correct breaker. Yep, no power. So this is on that circuit just as I remembered. That's going to be a very convenient place to tap power, because we could tap it off the power that's in this room, but it means messing with existing junction boxes. And I could tell you from experience, the box that this lamp's on, which is kind of like the main power junction point for this room, that's, well, at least it's the closest to where we need it to be, it's busy in there. It'd be a lot of work to go in there, and you know, that box is full. So to have this wire shooting off here, bam, done deal. Now, it just so happens, because of some of the previous electrical work, I have a surplus of the nice 20 amp cable. And I'm gonna be using this for two reasons. For one, that is a kitchen plug, and even though it's not a 20 amp circuit, there's no rule that says you have to use 15 amp wire. You have to use wire that's big enough, as long as it's big enough. So we can use 20 amp wire, especially this is color coded for 125 volts. We can use this wire to 15 amp circuit, no problem. That means if we ever do put that plug back to 20 amp code, we already have a piece of wire there. We don't have to run a new one. We can just junction it down here to the new 20 amp service, and if it's long enough, it will be able to directly daisy chain over to the other plug. So we won't even have to junction it. We can just wire it normally and then run 20 amps to that new plug. The second and most important reason why I'm using it is because I have it. I don't have any 14.2 in stock. I have 14.3, which is inappropriate. So whatever, I'm just gonna use it. All right, so we need to unsecure this wire. I have it in there with the wire staple. And it's one of the posh ones. If I can get it out nice, I won't waste it. So, gotta fish some wire through. Now we want it to come from over here. I need to determine my routing. I think under the circumstances, I'll just run it along under the studs. If it's semi-temporary to be changed later, and we need to reroute it, it'll be easier. So we kinda wanna pre-route it here, just like that. It'll be harder to pull around these corners. So we gotta kinda give it a strippy here. Little bits of a strippy. And then we gotta weave these together in like a way in which it won't come loose. Typically, we pick one of the wires in the middle and we wrap them around each other. So we're gonna zoop that like that, and then zoop that like that, and then it'll be virtually impossible for them to come loose. But then we might have a wad that's too big to fit through some of the holes. So that's the thing, you really gotta make this thin and narrow. So I think part of what we need to do here is I need to cut these down, a little bit of sacrifices, so that they're not part of the equation. We're just gonna be straight up dragging up on that ground line. I gotta wrap it as slim and tight as possible. Oh, we got a nice hump here it's gonna hang up on, that's great. Guaranteed that's gonna be a challenge for us. So at this point, it's almost impossible for that wire to come loose and come off. It could jam pretty bad, especially I got some bumpy edges there, but it can't come loose. So now we go upstairs and see if I can give it a bit of a tug. As is the classic, guaranteed we're gonna have the good old situation where I'm running up and down and up and down. Now this wire is secured in here, so let us unsecure it. I don't think there's enough ability for it to slip through. We're gonna have to completely take out this choke plate. Oh, we have some slack already, that's nice. And I felt something move in the ground. Okay, downstairs. So there's probably, it's just a little hung up here. I just gotta push it through. There's an initial hole there that's gonna be a bit tight. And then of course, we need to slack on this. Like that. That should be enough to get us right up there. Might have more, okay. Geez, this is shredding the metal cover on this. You're gonna wanna ruin this wire. Aha! Look at that. Wow, that's the quickest and easiest wire pull I've done, I think, in my history of this channel. Maybe I'm finally getting good at it. Or maybe it's just Maybelline. So after all, it's only a few feet from top to bottom. And you know what? We don't need any more slack. That's more than the perfect amount right there. Which means I'm gonna go ahead, I'm gonna put the choke plate back in, resecure our wire. So now I'm just gonna go ahead and install this receptacle. You can cut off this excess here. Strip it down. Grab my hook knife under there, pull down the center, yeah. We're gonna pick ourselves a ground lug here, bring our ground wire up and around that lug. Our box is now bonded. Now we just have to choose how much slack we need here. Because you know, we gotta be able to fold that in there after. But with this stiffer wire, and this thing's bulky, so it's like, we don't have the most amount of room to work with here. This has to be able to go up one solid fold, then down and into the receptacle. So ground wire is to come down underneath to just about the end. That would be about here. This one has to go about here, and this one has to go about, well, same length as this one, just the other side, right? Bit short, but I had to do that intentionally. All right, ground back wire on the bottom. Oh, back wiring is so convenient. We're gonna do a hard bend up and we're gonna try to fold it in there. Fold it in there. Yeah, looks like it'll be good. I gotta find this hole. Straight, there we go. Just give it a bit of a push. Oh yeah, it's gonna fit. If you put too much slack, oh, good luck fitting all that. Now we don't wanna put it too tight so it doesn't deform. That'll be good. So the rest of the kitchen aesthetic is like a burnt bronze, which I wasn't able to do for the switch because I couldn't get them in those kind of colors, but I still use the burnt bronze plate. Now I don't have any other burnt bronze plates. I'm gonna have to run out to one of the hardware stores I found them. So for the meantime, I'm just gonna use a plain black, just so it kind of matches the motif. I don't like white normally. You just have to find a couple screws that are gonna work. I only have one black screw. That's wonderful. Okay, well, I'm just gonna use silver screws then. And I'm using some stubbies, right? Because one trick with these decor plates is the screw is often on the physical outside of the box, so the screw will bottom out against the tile. It'll poke into drywall, but it'll bottom out against tile. Though there is spacing there for the screw to get through, but still, I'm not gonna use a longer screw than I need. Yeah, that one's just fine. Slight offset to get tension, but we match them up just so it looks uniform. We're done up here. Let's take the party back downstairs and get it hooked up to power. All right, just gonna make sure we clear that heating duct. And we're gonna go into this general direction here. I like that stud there. These things are always a bit tricky because they like to screw around a lot. Whoa, dust, careful. I think I got a bit of it in my mouth. Now the rule is wires get secured every 59 inches. So I think I'm gonna skip this stud here and move on to the next one. Oh, there's definitely rain all over me. Well, if I put it here, I'll be good. You think that slack will make it right up to the next one? I figure I should over slack it just to be sure. I'm gonna cut it right about, yeah. So I'll just get this in here, get this into box. All right, so to wire this up, we need to disconnect this ground bond wire. Because to the best of my knowledge, we're bonding one wire to the box and then directly connecting the two wires together. So I'm gonna go ahead and strip on this now. Roughly back here should be good. Pull this slack back through a bit. Secure down this ground wire to the box. I'm gonna secure these wires back down now. Then I'm gonna connect these two ground wires together. Now the rest of them. This is the neutral. There's no power on the neutral. Now remember, we don't pre-twist our wires together. We just kinda put them next to each other. We let the array do the work. And finally the hot. And now we should be all connected. We just put the plate in place, turn the power back on. We should be good upstairs. Okay, so here's my homemade circuit tester. We got the red light. Flick the switch. We still got the red light. Press a button, should do nothing. How this thing works is it's very similar principles, those little plug-in dealies you buy. I homemade it out of scrap parts one day when I'm like, oh, I need a tester. So the idea is we got a neon indicator light here. And if half the neon light is on hot, the other half is connected to this switch, and this switch will switch between neutral and ground. Obviously, hot plus neutral is power, the light lights up. But if we flick to ground, the light should stay lit because ground is at the same potential as neutral. You can technically pull power from ground, except you're not supposed to because that's not what it's for. But by testing the potential between hot and ground, if the light lights, that means we're wired correctly, because if the socket was wired backwards, you'd have a situation where the light would go out because it would have ground on one side, neutral on the other. And then of course the neon light's convenient because it doesn't pull enough power to trip things like GFCI. So I actually have a GFCI tester on there. I press that and it puts a very small 5.5 milliamp load to ground, which once you're detecting that amount of power, a GFCI will trip. So at the USB, this now means I should be able to charge phones and stuff directly off here too, right? Oh, such a novelty, USB receptacles. Not like they haven't existed for 10 years now. Yeah, it's charging. So this thing fully properly works now. We are mission accomplished. So now I just have to pull out the vacuum, clean up downstairs, and we're done here. I hope you enjoyed this. If you did, stay tuned. Sometimes I like to tinker on electrical, but mostly low voltage electrical. Not much else I need to do to my house even though no, this is the party for now. So until I decide something different. You babbling, bud? It must be the end of your video because you're not sure what else to say. You'd be correct. I never know how to end these videos. Cue the friggin' head, boop, there, yeah, and then hua, hua, oh, yeah, but that's pro. Yeah, just click, click, click that thing there. Yeah, you're gonna wanna click that thing. Well, I would like you to click that thing. No obligations though. To me, that is. You get the content that I make. Okay.